One rainy evening in London, Sophie stepped into work as a hotel receptionist for a day. She had no idea she'd meet a millionaire who would change her life. Under the dim glow of the front desk lamp, Sophie's fingers tapped nervously on an old computer. It was her first time working at the hotel, and she was only there because her best friend Lily had called 2 hours earlier, sick with a fever, begging her to cover the shift. The hotel was small, tucked between closed shops and quiet streets. The rain made everything feel lonely. The doorbell jingled. Sophie looked up, surprised. A tall man walked in, soaked from the storm. Water dripped from his dark coat, and his shoulders were slumped, as if the rain carried his sadness. His wet hair stuck to his forehead, and his eyes looked empty, like they hadn't seen hope in ages. Sophie smiled brightly. "Good evening. Do you have a booking?" she asked. He paused, standing still for too long. I'm not sure," he said, his voice quiet and rough. "I called earlier." Sophie nodded and typed on the computer. "No problem. What's your name?" He hesitated again, then said, "Oliver. Oliver Hartley." Sophie found his booking. "Got it. Room 204, one night, king bed, late checkout." She handed him the key card. Oliver took it slowly, their fingers touching for a moment. He didn't smile. "Thank you," he mumbled, then walked to the lift. He stopped halfway, standing still for a few seconds, then glanced back at Sophie. His empty eyes met hers briefly before he stepped into the lift and disappeared. Sophie let out a breath. Something about him made her feel sad, not scared. It was like watching someone lost in a storm, even though he stood on dry ground. An hour later, the lobby was quiet. Rain tapped the windows, matching the tick of the clock. Then, Sophie saw something outside. Through the glass doors, past the pouring rain, a man sat on a bench in the small garden outside room 204. No umbrella, no movement, just sitting, soaked. It was Oliver. Sophie stared. It had been over an hour since he checked in, yet he sat there, head down, shoulders low. She wanted to go out and ask if he was okay, but something stopped her. Not fear, but a feeling that this wasn't just a man in the rain. He was searching for something to feel. A flash of lightning lit the sky, showing his figure clearly, hands clasped tightly, like he was praying or hurting. Sophie's heart raced. She turned away from the window, her throat tight. Back at the desk, she stared at a blank notepad. Without thinking, she tore off a piece and wrote one sentence. She folded it carefully. No one else came into the lobby. The rain grew heavier, and Sophie sat quietly, holding the note, waiting for the right moment. That night, Sophie couldn't sleep. Even after her shift ended, after the manager thanked her with a tired smile, after she walked 12 blocks home through wet London streets, her mind stayed on Oliver Hartley. She whispered his name, as if it held a secret. The way he sat in the rain, unmoving, haunted her. His eyes didn't just show sadness, they showed emptiness, like he was only alive because no one told him to stop. By morning, Sophie was still awake, wrapped in a blanket in her tiny flat. The sounds of London traffic and a neighbor's TV buzzed faintly. She had seen that empty look before, in her own eyes, when life felt too heavy. She grabbed her old notebook, usually filled with shopping lists or reminders. She opened a blank page and paused. What could she say to a stranger? She wrote anyway. "If you're still alive today, you're braver than you think." No name, no explanation. Just truth. Something she needed to hear too. Before dawn, she returned to the hotel, saying she forgot her phone charger. No one questioned her. Room 204 was still occupied, a warm light glowing under the door. Sophie crouched, slid the note under with a shaky finger, and walked away, her heart pounding. The next morning, Oliver was gone. He'd checked out before sunrise, leaving no message, no trace. When Sophie asked Lily at the desk, she shrugged. "He just handed me the key and left. Didn't even want a receipt." Sophie felt a strange emptiness, like waiting for a letter that never arrived. She told herself it was silly to expect anything from a stranger, but she hoped her note had meant something. Days passed. Sophie went back to her busy life. Mornings at a bookshop, evenings at a cafe, and studying at the library. Money was tight, and her college fees were due. Her advisor warned she might lose her place if she didn't pay soon. She tried to forget Oliver. But sometimes, alone in the cafe, wiping tables, she'd remember the man in the rain, his eyes like empty windows. Did her note matter? Did he read it? Was he okay? She'd never know. But she hoped those words had helped him, even a little. 2 months later, Sophie opened an email titled, "Job Opportunity, Assistant to Director." She thought it was spam, but it had her full name and mentioned a personal recommendation. The sender was a big health tech company called Vital Tech. Sophie hadn't applied for the job. She called the number, hands shaking. "Good morning, this is Emma from Vital Tech," a cheerful voice said. "Is this Sophie Evans?" Sophie stammered. "Yes." They invited her for a meeting. "There's a mistake," Sophie said. "I didn't apply." Emma paused. "Someone recommended you but asked to stay anonymous." 3 days later, Sophie stood in Vital Tech's shiny London office, wearing her best second-hand blazer. The lobby was all marble and glass, her steps echoing. She was led to the top floor. Behind a sleek desk stood a man, looking out at the city skyline. He turned, and Sophie froze. It was Oliver, but not the man from the hotel. This Oliver stood tall, clean-shaven, in a sharp suit, his eyes alive. "I've just come back." Sophie couldn't speak. Oliver pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, her note, worn and water-stained. "If you're still alive today, you're braver than you think." "I kept it," he said softly. "I read it 3 times that morning. It made me get up, pack, and check out. Not because I felt better, but because someone believed I was worth saving." Sophie's chest tightened. "I'd planned to give up that night," Oliver said. "I wasn't in pain. I was numb. I thought nothing mattered. But your note broke through. It was hope." Sophie swallowed hard. You looked like you needed something real." "You were right," Oliver said. "I asked the hotel for your name, but waited to contact you until I had something to offer. This job is yours, not as a favor, but because your voice matters." Working with Oliver became Sophie's new routine. Each morning she entered Vital Tech's tall building with quiet confidence. Oliver, now fully back as CEO, wasn't like the cold bosses she'd imagined. He was kind, bringing her chamomile tea at 3 p.m. because she didn't like coffee. When it rained, he'd wait at the entrance with an umbrella, holding it over her. Every small task she did well, like organizing files or arranging a meeting, he'd smile and say, "Thank you, brave one." At first, it was just about her note, but over time it felt like he truly saw her strength. They grew close, sharing street food after work or sorting books in the company's small library. One night, they saw an old security guard struggling with a broken shoe. Oliver knelt, taped it together, and smiled kindly. Sophie watched, her heart full. He noticed people others ignored, maybe because he knew what it felt like to be invisible. They talked about dreams, fears, and childhood. But there was a line they never crossed, a quiet space between their laughter and silences. One evening, in the company's small garden, Sophie spoke softly. "I used to sell water at the cinema, in a uniform too big. My shoes squeaked. Once, I dropped a tray and cried for an hour." Oliver listened. "I never finished uni," she went on. "I can't afford it. I don't understand half the words here. I look things up at home and practice answers before meetings." "You're doing brilliantly," Oliver said. Sophie smiled faintly. "I don't belong here. I'm just a girl who sold water at the cinema." Oliver looked at her, serious but kind. He pulled out her note again, saying nothing. In that moment, Sophie felt both safe and scared of how deeply he saw her. One night, at a fancy company dinner, Sophie overheard 2 colleagues whisper. "Nice of the CEO to bring his assistant," one said, smirking. "Guess saving his life buys a seat at the table." The other laughed. Sophie froze, then left the room, their words following her. She slipped a note onto Oliver's plate. "You saved me from sadness, but now I need to save myself from forgetting who I am." She walked London streets for hours, past markets and dim pubs, remembering the girl she used to be. She wasn't angry, just afraid she was losing herself in Oliver's world, no matter how kind he was. She needed to find herself not as someone he saved, but as her own person. The next Monday, Sophie left a letter on Oliver's desk, asking for a break from work, not quitting, just time to grow. She thanked him for believing in her, but said she needed to walk her own path. She left her badge and walked out, knowing he'd understand. That evening, Sophie signed up for night classes, business, digital skills, and charity work. Her days became long, tutoring kids, doing data entry, rushing to classes. Her new flat was small, no lift or balcony, but it was hers. She paid her own rent, chose her own furniture, and owned her silence. Oliver offered help, a scholarship, a contact, but she said no, not out of pride, but because she wanted to build herself. They stayed in touch, not every day, but enough. Messages like, "Did a talk today, didn't faint," or "Tried that noodle place you liked, needs more garlic." It wasn't romance, but it was real. Sophie wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living, paying her rent, helping kids read, falling asleep on her own terms. Some nights, under the sound of London's rain, Sophie wrote in her journal, "He stood by my storm, not to pull me out, but to hold an umbrella. If I turn back and he's there when I'm ready, we'll start again. Not from the beginning, but as two whole people." 2 years later, Sophie stood in a London auditorium, speaking to a crowd. Her blonde hair was tied back, and she wore her mum's old navy dress. She didn't need notes. Her voice was clear, confident. She was being honored for her charity, helping women learn to read and access healthcare. It started with 1 classroom and 2 students. Now it was a big network, changing lives. As the crowd clapped, Sophie scanned the room. Then she saw him, Oliver, standing quietly at the back, in a gray suit, his hair a bit longer, a touch of gray. He hadn't sent flowers or booked a front seat. He'd just come. Their eyes met, and the noise faded. Later, they walked by the River Thames, where Sophie had wandered alone years ago. The air was cool, the city soft. "I didn't expect you," Sophie said. "I never stopped following your work," Oliver replied. They stopped by a bench. "Do you still have it?" she asked. Oliver pulled out her note, worn but clear. "If you're still alive today, you're braver than you think." Sophie's breath caught. "All my life," he said. "It gave mine back." He didn't propose. She didn't ask. But he held her hand and kissed her forehead, a quiet promise of now, not forever. They didn't move in together, but they shared small messages. "Today, I'm still alive, so I guess I'm still brave." Sophie kept building her charity. Oliver mentored young tech leaders. Their lives wove together, not out of need. If this story warmed your heart or reminded you of kindness's power, think about this. Sometimes small words can save someone. Sometimes healing comes in quiet moments, a folded note, or just showing up. If you love stories that inspire, join Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales of hope and strength. Thank you for reading, and remember, if you're here, you're braver than you think.